If stories like this move you, hit like and subscribe before you read another word. New stories every week about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. This is a story about what happens when power walks past wisdom without seeing it. When money convinces a man that he already knows the value of every person in a room. When arrogance and grace end up standing in the same corridor, and only one of them knows what really happened there. She was on her knees scrubbing the baseboard of a private hospital corridor when he came around the corner with 4 people behind him. She heard him before she saw him. The sharp, deliberate click of expensive shoes on tile. The low murmur of assistants keeping pace. The particular silence that forms around powerful men, the way other sounds seem to pull back and give them room. She kept her head down and her hands moving. She had learned a long time ago that the best thing a woman in her position could do when men like this walked through was become part of the wall. He was Harrison Caldwell, 61 years old, founder of Caldwell Capital, one of the largest private equity firms in the southeastern United States. Worth, according to the most recent estimate she had seen on a waiting room television, somewhere in the range of $4.2 billion. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than her monthly rent. He was moving through the corridor of Whitmore Regional Medical Center the way he moved through every space he entered, as if it had been built for him specifically, and everyone inside it was a supporting character in his story. He almost stepped on her hand. He didn't apologize. He didn't stop. He glanced down for half a second the way you glance at a crack in the sidewalk, registering an obstacle, adjusting course, moving on. His eyes passed over her kneeling figure with the complete, practiced blankness of a man who had spent 60 years not seeing certain kinds of people. His assistant leaned toward him and said something about the room being ready. Harrison nodded, still walking. Then he paused, turned back, looked at her again, this time with the specific expression of a man who has just remembered something mildly inconvenient. "Is this corridor going to be cleaned during visiting hours?" he said, not to her, to the hospital administrator who was hurrying to keep up with him. "I don't want my son's recovery disrupted by," he gestured vaguely in her direction, "all of this. The carts, the equipment. Can someone coordinate the cleaning schedule so the staff isn't underfoot when family is present?" The administrator nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell. Absolutely." Harrison looked down at her one more time. His expression was not cruel. It was something worse than cruel. It was the look of a man who has never once had to consider that the person kneeling on a floor in front of him might have anything to offer him. She was staff, she was a cleaner, she was furniture. "Just try to keep it efficient," he said to no one in particular, and walked away. Her name was Diane Mosley. She was 47 years old. She held a registered nursing license that she had earned at Georgia State University on a partial scholarship and 2 jobs. She had 19 years of critical care experience behind her, 19 years of emergency bays and ICU corridors, and the kind of night shifts that teach you things about the human body that no textbook ever quite captures. She had a stethoscope in her locker on the 3rd floor of this exact building. She had spent the better part of 2 decades being the person in the room who noticed what was about to go wrong before it went wrong. She was on her knees scrubbing a baseboard because her nursing contract had ended 4 months ago, and the next placement had not come through, and the rent was due, and this was what was available. She watched Harrison Caldwell's shoes disappear around the corner. She went back to scrubbing. What Harrison Caldwell did not know, could not have known, because he had never looked at her long enough to wonder anything about her, was that 18 hours earlier, Diane Mosley had saved his son's life. Cole Caldwell was 24 years old. He had spent 14 months backpacking through Southeast Asia and had come home 2 weeks before with what everyone assumed was travel fatigue. On the Wednesday evening before his father's visit, he had been brought into Whitmore Regional by ambulance presenting with chest tightness and shortness of breath. The paramedics had flagged elevated heart rate. The ER intake team had assessed him as a probable anxiety episode, young man, long travel, likely dehydrated, nothing immediately alarming. He was placed in a monitoring bay and told a doctor would be with him shortly. Shortly became 45 minutes. Diane had been restocking supply carts in the corridor adjacent to the monitoring bays when she slowed down, then stopped. She had not heard anything alarming. She had heard the opposite of something alarming. She had heard a quality of silence coming from Bay 4 that did not belong there. Anxiety has a sound. People who are anxious and uncomfortable make noise. They shift in beds. They exhale too loudly. They tap their fingers and check their phones and ask the passing nurses how much longer it will be. What Diane heard from behind the curtain of Bay 4 was not that. It was shallow, heavy, the specific texture of breathing that she had learned to recognize over 19 years of sitting at bedsides, where things were deteriorating faster than anyone had noticed. She looked through the curtain gap. Cole was leaning to one side. His lips were gray. His hand had fallen from the bedrail. His eyes were open but fixed on nothing. She went through the curtain without hesitating. 2 fingers to his neck confirmed what she already suspected: pulse rapid and thready and weak, the body's last stage attempt to compensate for something it could no longer manage on its own. She hit the emergency call button, lowered the bedrail, positioned him flat, opened his airway, and began counting his respiratory rate against the clock on the wall. The first nurse arrived in less than 30 seconds. Then a resident who pushed through the curtain and looked at Diane with the expression people always had when they found her somewhere she did not appear to belong. "Who are you?" he said. "Maintenance," she said. 19 years in critical care. His pulse is rapid and weak. I'm estimating 130 or above. Respiratory rate is elevated and shallow. This is not anxiety. He needs a 12-lead ECG right now and a chest CT with contrast. Do not wait. The resident looked at her uniform, her cart visible through the curtain, the mop leaning against the wall outside. "Run the 12-lead," she said again. Her voice did not waver. He ran it. The results came back in under 5 minutes. Bilateral pulmonary embolism, clots in both lungs, extensive. The attending physician who reviewed the scan said afterward that another 15 minutes without intervention would in all likelihood have been fatal. Cole was in the ICU within the hour. Emergency anticoagulation therapy was started. He stabilized through the night. By the following afternoon, he was breathing on his own and asking for food. Diane had finished her shift, driven home, heated up leftover soup, and gone to sleep. She had written 3 sentences in the maintenance incident log under her employee number. She had not mentioned her nursing background. She had not told anyone what she had done. She did not know whose son she had saved. She did not think of it as saving anyone. She thought of it as doing what she knew how to do because she happened to be there and no one else was. Harrison Caldwell arrived the next morning and walked past her in the corridor and told the administrator to coordinate the cleaning schedule so the staff would not be underfoot. 2 days after that, his son came home. Harrison was in the administrator's office going over discharge paperwork when the attending physician, Dr. Anita Usu, knocked on the open door. She wanted to speak with him about something before he left. She sat down across from him and told him what had happened 2 nights before Cole's discharge. She had been meaning to ensure he knew, she said, because she thought it was important. She told him about the monitoring bay, about the 45-minute wait, about the bilateral embolism that had been caught at the last possible window, about the staff member who had looked through the curtain gap and recognized what she was seeing and acted without hesitation. Harrison listened. He leaned forward. "Which nurse?" he said. Dr. Usu paused. "That's the thing I wanted to make sure you understood," she said. "She wasn't a nurse, not on duty. She was maintenance staff. She was restocking supply carts in the adjacent corridor." The room was quiet for a moment. "She identified a bilateral pulmonary embolism," Harrison said. "She identified the clinical presentation consistent with one," Dr. Usu said carefully. "She called for help and gave a clear and accurate assessment to the responding resident, and then she went back to her cart." She paused. "She has a nursing license, 19 years in critical care. She's been working maintenance here for 4 months because her contract placement fell through." Harrison sat with that for a long moment. "What's her name?" "Diane Mosley." He asked the administrator to find her. She was in the East Wing corridor when the administrator caught up with her. He told her that Mr. Caldwell would like to speak with her. She looked at him for a moment without expression, then set her cart against the wall and followed him. Harrison was standing in the corridor outside his son's former room. He had sent his assistant and his lawyers to wait by the car. He was alone in a way that men like him rarely allow themselves to be in professional settings. Diane came around the corner and stopped a few feet away from him. She recognized him immediately. He was the man who had almost stepped on her hand. He was the man who had told the administrator to keep the cleaning staff from being underfoot. He looked at her and she could see the moment he recognized her too. She watched something move through his face that she could not immediately name. It was not quite guilt, and it was not quite embarrassment, and it was not quite gratitude. It was all 3 at once pressing against each other behind his eyes. "You're the one who helped my son," he said. "I called for help," she said. "The medical team did the rest. Dr. Usu told me what you identified. What you did, he paused. She said another 15 minutes and he would not have survived. Diane said nothing. You were in the corridor, he said, when I came through yesterday morning. He stopped. He was not a man who struggled to speak. He was struggling now. I told them to coordinate the cleaning schedule. I said, he stopped again. I know what you said, Diane said. Her voice was not angry. It was simply level. The voice of a woman who had heard many variations of that same sentence over many years, and had made her peace with the fact that the world sorted people into categories before it looked at their faces, and that her job was not to wait for the world to correct itself, but to do her work regardless. Harrison Caldwell looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time since he had entered this building. I owe you my son's life, he said. You owe the system a conversation, she said, about why a nurse with 19 years of critical care experience is scrubbing baseboards because her contract placement fell through. I'm not the only one. He was quiet. I don't need anything from you personally, she said. I have a job. I have a license. I'll get another contract eventually. But there are nurses, good ones, experienced ones, working below their qualification level in this hospital and in hospitals all over this state, and nobody is coordinating the cleaning schedule around that problem. Harrison Caldwell had built a $4 billion company on his ability to identify what mattered in a situation. Standing in that corridor looking at this woman, he understood with complete clarity that he was being told the most important thing anyone had said to him in years. And he understood something else. He understood that the woman telling him had already done more for his family than anyone on his payroll, while wearing a gray uniform and being told to stay out of the way. Tell me what it looks like, he said. The system. Tell me where it breaks, she told him. She stood in that corridor for 40 minutes and she told him exactly where it broke and how and why and what it cost the people who fell through the gaps. He did not interrupt her. He did not check his phone. He listened the way people listen when they understand that they are hearing something they cannot afford to miss. What followed was not a simple story of a rich man writing a check and fixing everything. Diane had made clear she did not want that, and he had been paying enough attention by then to understand that offering it would be an insult. She negotiated her own reinstatement to a senior clinical nursing position at Whitmore Regional, with written formal commitments on equitable promotion criteria and a permanent seat on the patient safety committee. She negotiated it herself. She did not ask Harrison to negotiate it for her. Harrison established the Cole Caldwell Clinical Equity Initiative, $10 million directed at identifying and addressing qualification gaps in frontline healthcare staffing, with a specific focus on nurses from underrepresented communities who were working beneath their experience level for structural reasons that had nothing to do with their ability. He brought in Dr. Wusu to lead it. He asked Diane to sit on the advisory board. She said she would think about it. Then she said yes. Cole recovered completely. He enrolled in pre-medicine at Emory the following semester. Before he left, he went to find Diane in the clinical wing where she was back in scrubs, back at a bedside, back doing what she had spent 19 years learning how to do. I wanted to say thank you, he said. In person. You already did, she said. I wanted to do it knowing who I was thanking, he said. She looked at him. He had his father's eyes, but something different in them. Something that had not been there before a Thursday night in a monitoring bay when a woman with a cleaning cart had looked through a curtain gap and seen him clearly when no one else had. How did you know? He asked. How did you know something was wrong when everyone else missed it? She thought about it honestly before she answered. I've been paying attention my whole life, she said. When the world doesn't always see you, you learn to see everything. You learn to notice the small things, the things that are slightly off, the things that don't quite fit. She paused. Because when you've spent your whole life being the thing that doesn't fit, you recognize it in others pretty fast. Cole wrote it down. He kept it for the rest of his life. Diane went back to her patient. Senior clinical nurse, critical care, Whitmore Regional Medical Center. Same hands that had scrubbed baseboards 4 months before. Same eyes that had looked through a curtain gap and recognized what no one else on that floor had stopped long enough to see. The corridor was the same corridor. She was no longer invisible in it. The truth has a way of surfacing, even in the places built to keep it down. Even when it is on its knees scrubbing a baseboard while expensive shoes click past without stopping. It surfaces. It always does. Hit like. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and hit the bell. We tell stories like this every single week. Share this today with someone who needs to be reminded that the most important person in the room is not always the one making the most noise. And leave a comment, have you ever been dismissed, overlooked, treated like furniture, and kept showing up anyway? Tell me. You deserve to be seen. See you in the next one.